Hello, Rokien here. Today I want to talk about massively multiplayer online role-playing games and how my much-loved genre has hastily changed in direction because of modern-day gaming. I will be using Final Fantasy XIV as a reference throughout this video. The reason why is I used to talk about it for countless hours, and I've played it throughout 1.0 and 2.0. So I've seen how it drastically changed from one game to the other. So it serves as a good example for modern day MMORPGs, I feel. But no matter what game one plays, they are very similar on how they play out. The largest difference is the setting that they are in. The quest, story, world, and most importantly, the players are basically the same. Forgettable. Let us look at the structure that all these MMOs use. The base of it all is the end game, where the main focus is placed when creating the game. Then every other mechanic branches off from there, trying to form around this concept of end game. It's where most people would say the game finally starts, seeing as that is where the fun is, interactiveness, and difficult part is. It is an issue because everything else suffers from it. They are second in thought. Everything suffers because they become meaningless. It becomes meaningless to the players and to the developers because everything one accomplishes up to that point gets tossed aside. So why spend extra time on something the players are only going to do once or twice? Final Fantasy XIV, when it first came out, had about 2,000 quests, 30 dungeons, and over 1,000 other activities like fates. This is great for keeping one busy by giving them things to do, though most of it is just a means of helping the player towards that end game goal. Thus, the only purpose they serve is some lore aspects, and they don't have much to them. So in these MMOs, the player, after the fact of hours of playing, mostly by themselves, there is no character development or very little player interaction, thus hurting the community, which is the biggest part of an MMO. So if we change that main focus over to the multiplayer aspect, the whole game becomes unified. It is unified because multiplayer is an idea that is placed on each mechanic, and not a mechanic in itself, but an effect. What this does is it makes for a more dynamic, rich world, with each individual players having a different experience, but are able to experience it together, instead of a linear journey where everyone participates in exactly the same things in the exact same way. The developers then have to create more meaning for each content that takes into consideration of that player-to-player interaction. The players will no longer be playing alongside each other, but with one another. With all those activities in Final Fantasy XIV, only a select few requires the player to actually play with and not just alongside each other. All quests, early dungeons, anything that isn't a raid is met by a single player mindset, where it focuses on the individual accessibility towards the game, which is not a bad thing for people with not a lot of time on their hands. However, it affects the game in the long run. When Final Fantasy just came out, it already felt this effect, and it's still feeling it. Because the game is so accessible for everyone, the need or want of new content is even greater. So what happens is that the developers produce indirectly the treadmill effect. It is a cyclical trend in almost every modern MMO. However, what is it? Well, as I stated in the beginning of the video, where gear, quests, everything is forgettable and gets tossed aside, I was referring to this effect. This effect is debilitating for not only the game, but for the developers as well. They have to work twice as hard to keep the customers happy, when, if they put more thought and depth to each system, they wouldn't have to come up with as many new ideas for content as quickly, making the content have actual quality. Here's an example. Would you rather have, let's say, 10 quests where you have to run back and forth just to complete them, or one really long quest that takes you on an adventure? I personally would want the one quest that takes a long time to do and that has some sort of meaning behind it. and I remember it. Now, don't get me wrong, I do have fun playing Final Fantasy XIV for a short amount of time, until I get caught up to where the content ends. Then I stop playing, or I play once a week for weeklies and dailies. This is what I like to call a once-a-week MMO. It's sad to me, because MMOs are my favorite genre, and I have the most potential out of any game, I think, to be amazing. They just all miss the mark. Play it safe. Rinse and repeat.